Hello and welcome to State of the Economy. Today we have with us Dr. Ashok Gulati, Chairman of Commission for Agriculture Costs and Prices, who will tell us in some detail the impact of India's massive food security program, the legislated food security program, on our WTO negotiations in Bali in December. India is one of the countries which is trying to defend its food procurement program besides China, Indonesia, Pakistan and other countries. And some of the developed countries like the US and EU are trying to tell the developing countries that such procurement, high level of procurement is not possible under the existing WTO framework. To understand the politics and the dynamics at play, welcome to our show, Dr. Ashok Gulati. Now, please tell us exactly, in very simple terms, what are the issues at stake in regard to our food procurement program and our stand at the WTO under the agreement on agriculture?
You know, the agreement on agriculture and the question of public stockholding, that is an issue that is being discussed or likely to be discussed in the Bali Ministerial Conference. What is happening is that when India has passed the act here, we are likely to be procuring, stocking and distributing quite a big quantity. You know, last year we had 80 million tons, this year we had 74 million tons of food grain stocks. Now, the rest of the world is somewhat worried that if those stocks are so huge and suddenly you take a policy decision to liquidate those stocks at a price which is less than the market price, then it is going to distort the global markets. So that is their concern, right? The question is, we want what we want to do, the flexibility to do it, and the rest of the world needs to be assured that our actions will not be creating more trade distortionary effects in the global markets. That's the bottom line. Now, if we go by what we are doing, then there is an issue that our stocking and procurement does not go beyond what the de minimis support has been agreed to in the agreement on agriculture, which is 10%. Now, the problem that starts coming in…
Okay, can you explain this? That means we cannot pay farmers more beyond, say, 10% higher than the production value of
That's right.
The grains, right?
So, because it is tied to the value of your agriculture output, and it was agreed in the agreement on agriculture in the WTO that India will not exceed its limit of 10%. This is for all the developing countries. In fact, China has a little lower because they entered the game later. So this…
But China is a much bigger procurer of food grains.
Well, that question, how much they procure…
200 million tons, I am told.
That is an indirect way to estimate how much stocks they have today, because Chinese government does not notify what level of stocks they have. They don't run this type of a public distribution system on a subsidized…
But they do procure from the market.
They do procure and they do stock, and how much is being stocked officially there is no figure, but some indirect estimates have been made.
So the issue at stake is at what price can we procure from the farmers? How much of a price can we give the farmers? How much beyond which we can't exceed, right?
That's right. So the question is, what is the MSP at which you can buy? And if that MSP exceeds your external reference price that was fixed in 1986 to 88, that is the fixed external reference price, and you have to compare with that. Now, the problem is, at that time, the notification that India had done was in rupees. Now,
was that a mistake? Should have been done in dollars?
Well, it's not, because there is another article 18.4 which says that a due consideration will be given to the excessive rates of inflation in developing countries.
as opposed to the developed world. Yeah. Okay.
So, question is that interpretation, whether it is in relation to the developed world or what is this excessive rate of inflation, I think that is what the Committee on Agriculture needs to decide.
In fact, this would be the main point of negotiation for India at Bali with the US and EU, right?
I would say this is what India should seek clarification.
Okay.
And we should push for full rate of inflation being adjusted
Full
if
inflation
possible,
adjustment, yeah.
because our food inflation has been hovering around 10% lately. Earlier it was less than 4%.
Here, Dr. Gulati, just to clarify, the external reference price fixed in 86 to 1988, since then we've had 500%
Rate of
inflation in food grains, right? So what we are going to argue at Bali is that we have a right to add 500% to that reference price to then arrive at the limit, at the higher limit of procurement price that we can offer to farmers.
That's right.
That is
so that's the way that, because those 86, 88 prices are irrelevant in today's price vector. Globally, even in dollar terms, you know, after the 2007-8 crisis in the global prices of food, the whole price vector is different today.
Okay.
Therefore, I think there is a need to renegotiate what should be the base external reference price. Instead of 86, 88, it may have to be 9 to 11 or
so
something
Dr.
like
Gulati,
that.
it will be fair to say that in 1986-88 we did not anticipate that we could run into some of these issues, right?
No, not at all. So I don't think it was a big error in that respect.
Yeah, but it's just that we couldn't anticipate that a time will come when we would have to argue for full inflation adjustment to be allowed, so that we could pay our farmers a much higher price to actually run our own food security program, right?
Sure. I think the clauses are there. They need some clarity.
Okay.
You know, Article 18.4 clearly states that excessive rates of inflation, due consideration will be given to them.
Due consideration, yeah.
Yeah. So the question is, you have to go back to the committee and seek what is that due consideration. And that's where negotiation has to take place.
Exactly. That's what we have to argue for.
That's right.
Yeah, we'll come back to this point, but after a small break, please stay with us. Welcome back to State of the Economy. We are having a conversation with Dr. Ashok Gulati, Chairman of Commission for Agriculture Costs and Prices, on India's stance in WTO vis-a-vis our food security program. Very, very critical food legislation program. Dr. Gulati, now, as we discussed in our previous segment, the crux of the issue is whether India is able to negotiate with the US and EU, especially particularly with the developed economies, full inflation allowance in relation to the reference price, so that we can offer higher prices to the farmer. But I am told that the Americans are not willing to give us full inflation allowance, because they would claim that Article 18.4, which you talked about, says due allowance for inflation will be given. So there's an interpretation problem. Whether due allowance is full allowance. Is that a problem?
You know, the problem at present, as I visualize, is what is being offered on the table is a peace clause.
Okay.
That means if you are violating, you are breaching the limits of de minimis, then we will keep our eyes closed for 2 years or 4 years. That is one of the negotiations that is likely to be discussed.
But if you agree to that, that means you are agreeing to
that's exactly
the basic fact that you are in violation.
So, in fact, I feel this peace clause is like lying a trap.
Okay.
You know, if you agree that, okay, peace clause for 2 years or 4 years is agreeable to India, that means we are not willing to negotiate what is the excessive rate of inflation and therefore the adjustment, and therefore we will be weaker on that front after accepting this. So my suggestion or plea to the government would be to ask for clarity in 18.4, and that should be the one to be negotiated.
And not agree to the peace clause.
Peace clause,
that,
to me, my personal take on that is, after having looked at the details, that this will not be in the best interest of the
Okay. So what you're suggesting is that if we agree to a peace clause, say deferment by 3 years of the problem, you end up admitting that there's a problem, which we should not.
Even if you have not breached the de minimis, de facto you are admitting that you have already violated. And therefore somebody is giving you some breathing space.
Okay, so you can't admit that you're in violation at all at this stage.
We are not. In fact, if we get the clarity on 18.4 and negotiate hard on that, we have not.
So you're saying
and we will not.
So you're saying if full inflation allowance is allowed, then we are not in violation. That's right. Are other countries like Indonesia, China, Pakistan, I'm told they are with us on this?
I think China, Indonesia are at present not, yes, at present G33, that is what it is being led by. So India and China and Indonesia, they want in a way unlimited stocks for food security purposes at whatever the price, which to some extent, this is like asking for a right to whatever price we want to pay to our farmers, whatever stock we want to hold. You can do that if you do not disturb the world markets too much. Now China, although it may be having much bigger stocks than ours, but doesn't enter the world market as an exporter of 10 million tons of rice. So it doesn't disturb the world market.
It doesn't distort the market.
Same thing is with Indonesia. It doesn't come in wheat and rice in that. So the problem comes with India.
India will be held up as a responsible country for distorting world markets.
Because the world is, and I think rightly so, is, these are administrative decisions. Today if you have 20 million tons extra and an administrative decision is taken that wheat should be exported at, let's say, $200 a ton or $250 a ton or $300, these are administrative decisions. So either let the markets function, and that's where the world is worried about, or at least, they had been distorting. So
that's what Dr. Gulati, our argument is that the West, even today, is distorting far more than
that's right.
us.
That's right.
So where does the agreement on agriculture then balance these two considerations?
I think the whole focus of Bali negotiations should have been that export subsidies of the EU particularly should have been totally abolished, which in principle was agreed earlier. And then the US and the EU, their support levels need to be brought down. So instead of focus being there, now the focus is turning back on India that you cannot increase your support levels. Our support levels are, so the whole system is biased in favor of those who had notified higher support levels, so they will be coming down. But India and China, because they are at such a stage of development, they will be increasing their support levels to agriculture. So it's a stage of development.
So you're saying that there's an inherent advantage that that US and EU have at this stage in the WTO negotiations of support prices for farmers, right?
I think what will in the next 5 years, 10 years likely to happen, and if you look what happened in the last 5-7 years, the support in India and China to farmers increased very dramatically compared to what was happening in EU or in US. There is no doubt about that. And that is in China, for example, as the inequalities increase, then they will have to give more and more to the rural areas to match with the urban areas. That's what the process of development, that's how EU and US distorted their agriculture. India is still somewhat behind China on that front, but the pressure will build up.
So you're suggesting that it's an irony that as you develop, your distortions on agriculture actually increases. That's what history of agriculture economy tells us.
Because the productivity in agriculture will never be as high as in non-agriculture sector. So to keep a balance between agriculture and non-agriculture sector, you will have to give some incentives for people to stay in agriculture. Although in India we are still way behind on that, curve, because we have too many people still in agriculture. But in US it's only 3%, less than 3% of the work.
So they need even more incentives.
That's right.
Yeah, fewer people in agriculture. Yeah, so we'll come back to this point, but after a small break, do stay with us. Welcome back to State of the Economy. Dr. Gulati, you were very rightly pointing out how inflation over the last 15-20 years, ever since we negotiated the agreement on agriculture, where this reference price was fixed, based on which countries can offer support prices to farmers, inflation in the intervening period has really galloped, and this has been given a further fillip. The inflation phenomena has even aggravated even more since 2006-07, when the Federal Reserve and the developed country central banks in general were pushing heavy monetary stimulus, which led to what is described as financialization of commodities. A lot of speculation in food grains, in all kinds of other commodities. So, are we going to argue in the WTO that this was a problem which also came in essentially from the West, and this high inflation is being sort of suffered by developing world, which is now having to give higher procurement price for farmers?
I think you have hit the nail in the coffin, really. After 2007-08, the world is very different as far as agriculture prices are concerned.
And food inflation is concerned.
And this has happened all the world over. The price vector, whether it is the developed world or global markets, suddenly are at a different level, which is 40–50% higher than what it was earlier. One of the factors was financialization. Because of the collapse of housing market, the finances started moving towards commodities. But the bigger problem in 2008, because there was a recession coming in and the G8 plus 5 decided to give deliberate stimulus. US gave $600 billion, EU gave about 200 billion euros, and China also about $589 billion around that. And India fell in that category of giving stimulus.
Pushed through the banking system.
That's right, from loan waivers to Manrega expansion to all these, this was huge. So, as a result, the global prices are at a very different level than they were at 4.5 or 5.6.
Can you give a comparison?
It's about 50% higher, you can say, in dollar terms. Now, in dollar terms, if that the worst happened in country like India, where the stimulus, an average household is still spending 50% of expenditure on food. So, there was a huge pressure on food. Take the case between 2001 to 2007 or 2000 to 2007, India's food inflation was 3.8%. Average. And after 2008 to 13, it is 10.2, 10.3%.
That's nearly 3 times increase.
It's 2.5 times roughly, 2.5 times higher. And one of the main reasons of that is, in 2008, our fiscal deficit doubled. 100% more than what it was last year as a result of that stimulus. Now we have stayed at a high, so the whole tide is high. As a result, the agriculture prices are high, and in a country like India where the rupee started losing its strength, so you have a double whammy. You have international dollar prices going up, but then you have rupee depreciating, so your rate of inflation is even more. And as a result, I feel that fixed external reference price of 86 to 88 is irrelevant today. So, our negotiations in Bali should be what is the right external price now, and that could be whether it is 9 to 11 or 9 to 12 or whatever the world agrees on.
You're suggesting that all the countries, at least the developing countries, should ask for a new reference price, right? It's like a new base price.
That's right, because 86, 88, the world has changed dramatically.
Absolutely, there's no doubt about it. And do you think that this issue can also be sort of argued at G20, whose mandate it is to look at the distortions created post 2008 financial crisis?
Sure. Whether it should be taken up at G20 or G33 or whichever, but at a higher level, first we have to work out our strategy. As in India, if I speak as an Indian rather than as a global citizen, then first every country looks at what serves its interest
Absolutely.
best. So, why this problem is coming? Because we have launched a food security act.
Yeah, we have to feed 70% of our population
We also,
subsidized food.
Yes, there is no problem in subsidizing your poor consumers if you want to. The people are worried about what instruments you are using, whether they are more trade distorting or not. Now, the whole world has moved on from physical distribution of grains to income transfers. Even, we talk about Brazil, Mexico, Philippines, all these countries. Even Pakistan, as you rightly said, the Benazir Income Support Program, they have dismantled their fair price shops and all that. So, that is much more efficient a tool and less trade distorting. So, if you go by that, there is no objection, because then you don't need to have 80 million tons of stocks, you need only strategic.
But Dr. Gulati, one argument against that is two arguments. One is that it doesn't protect real incomes of the people. Like if it is cash.
No. You can index it. Your income, my income is indexed with the DA. So same thing can be done with them. That's not a problem.
And then, of course, what do you do with public distribution systems is running very efficiently in many states.
Very few, 5, 6 states. But the larger chunk, it is not running very nicely.
Of course, UP, Bihar, you can start on a clean slate.
But that's where the largest number of poor are.
Exactly.
I mean, our estimates show Bihar in 2009 had a leakage rate in PDS of 71%.
And I'm told that the Bihar Chief Minister Nitish Kumar has been open to using cash transfer.
That's right. So you should welcome that. You should give actually a choice. We have recommended and submitted to the government that you start with the cities. 33 cities with more than 1 million population, there is financial infrastructure, you start with them. Second, you start with the farmers, because farmers today are bringing everything to the government and selling what they were earlier holding for self-consumption. Now they are bringing to the government and then asking government, give me back the same rice at 1 rupee or 2 rupees, unnecessarily unloading the system. So I think the farmers can be given compensation, the gap between the whatever economic cost and the price you want to pay. And then if some states and some remote areas, tribal areas want physical distribution, you can continue with that.
Sure.
So I think one size will not fit.
Yeah, that is something which many analysts are now saying, because India, 22 states, each state has different needs, and different solutions. But coming back to our WTO position, is there a problem with non-product specific subsidies also? Because so far we've been talking about product specific subsidies. Whether it's wheat or rice, but what about non-product specific?
That's right. In non-product specific, basically the subsidies on fertilizer, on irrigation, on power, on credit.
On that, India is not in violation, or are we under pressure on that also?
If you look as a value to agriculture output, then frankly you have exceeded at times. In 2008-9, I think we went all the way even up to 15% of the value of agriculture output. But again, there is another article, 6.2, which says that the subsidies being given to low income or resource poor farmers would be exempt. Now, what is low income and resource poor? Now, in a barren land, even 10 hectares is a low income and resource poor farmer. So you need clarity whether it is a 2 hectare or 4 hectare or 10 hectare or 20 hectare. What is the level?
Small farmer.
Now, India in its consequent, subsequent submissions has taken 10 hectares as and therefore 98% of whatever subsidy we are giving under that is exempt.
So is it accepted by everybody?
That's a question mark, but
still being negotiated.
So far I think we need clarity on 6.2 article for non-product specific, so that this exemption to low-income, resource-poor farmers, and 18.4 article as far as the external reference price and inflation adjustment. These are the two things on which we should negotiate, but don't lose focus that we have to negotiate and fight for reduction in the huge subsidies by the OECD countries. I think the whole Bali conference is turning on India rather than it should be on EU and US and Japan and others, OECD countries, those who have been subsidizing hugely.
That's what is surprising, yeah. So let's hope that India and other developing countries turn the tables on the developed world in regard to their distortions and not concentrate the entire discussions on possible violations by the developing world. Thank you very much for talking to us, Dr. Ashok Gulati. That's all we have in this edition of State of the Economy. We'll be back with you next week. Thanks for watching.